Keto and Krime, Keto and Krime. We uncover the grime on Keto and Krime. Keto and Krime, Keto and Krime. Now is the time for Keto and Krime.
Hey everyone, welcome to Keto and Krime and Thought Crime. And today I've got a very interesting episode for you. We're looking at two different things today. We're looking at both the real life murder that occurred in this house in the 1970s in Amityville, Long Island, New York. And we're also looking at the legend, the con, the whatever that has captivated America from this house. Yes, we are talking about the case of the Amityville Horror. So we're going to talk about what really happened, what's actually observable, and then everything else. And so I hope you enjoy it. And with that, let's get started. To start, let's talk about the real life murder. We have to talk about Ronald Joseph DeFeo Jr., born September 26, 1951. He died this year, 2021, at the age of 69 on March 12th. He moved into the Amityville, Long Island, New York house with his parents, Ronald Sr., Louise, and four siblings, sisters Dawn, Allison, Mark, and John Matthew. They lived in the house for a couple of years. According to reports and according to legend, if you will, he basically cited an abusive father, that Ronald Sr. was never, it was hard to please Ronald Sr. Let's just put it that way. He never was pleased with anything his older son did. He was said to be very abusive to the entire family. Now, of course, we're talking 50s, 60s, and 70s. They didn't keep as good records about that as they do today. So who knows? But that was what was cited. But basically what this whole legend of Amityville boils down to is November 13th, 1974. At the time, Ronald Jr., also known as Butch, was 23 years old. 6:30 p.m. He came into a local bar called Henry's in the Amityville, Long Island area, and basically told everyone, "You got to help me. I think my mother and father are shot." He then led a group of people back to 112 Ocean Avenue, this house, and they found that indeed his parents and all of his siblings were dead inside. All of them had been dead for several hours, at least 12 hours. And as it would turn out, they had been dead since at least 3:15 a.m. that morning. Some of the oddities were that all of them were lying on their stomach, facing the door of their room. Now, that has gone into legend, but the fact is that, yes, they were all on their stomach, facing the door of their room, and many of them had been shot in the face, in the head, and they were all expired. Immediately, they took Butch into custody and took him to the police station for his own protection, where at first he said that his father was in cahoots with the mob and that his family had been killed by a mob hitman by the name of Louis Fellini. However, there was a lot of stuff that didn't really match up in the police's reckoning. There wasn't a whole lot that matched up. Since living in the house since 1965, the family had been kind of reclusive. Butch was considered kind of weird around town. And so there was this overarching idea that he was just strange and odd, and therefore they didn't really believe him. They started doing the forensics on the bodies and realized that probably the mother, Louise, and one of the daughters, Allison, were probably awake when they were shot, where the others appeared they were asleep or drugged when they were shot. Now, they did do autopsies and no drugs were found to indicate that they were not drugged. But finally, after more police interrogation, and I know during the 70s, I have no doubt that they interrogated him for hours and hours on end. We saw that happen at the West Memphis 3. That took place in the 90s, where they literally interrogated the boys for hours upon hours. But basically, he finally broke down, crying, and confessed that he himself had killed them after they actually rounded up this Fellini, this alleged mob hitman who had a rock solid alibi. It was only after then that Butch broke down and confessed. And he told detectives he arrived home early in the morning, sometime between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m., and admitted that he had just had a mental health crisis and took it out on his family, shooting them all in their beds. He said, once I started, I just couldn't stop. It went so fast. He then admitted he had taken a bath, washed blood and excrement off himself, and redressed, and then had discarded all the bloodstained clothes, the Martin rifle that he used, a Marlin 336C rifle, and the cartridges, and then went to work. And then during his work day had kind of a crisis of conscience and decided, oh, I better tell people what's happened, and went into the bar, and we know the rest of the story. His trial began October of 1975, and his defense attorney, a gentleman by the name of William Weber, mounted a not guilty by reason of insanity. He also claimed that DeFeo was not only insane, but he also felt it was self-defense because the voices in his head were telling him that his family was out to get him. They actually had a psychiatrist by the name of Daniel Schwartz, that, as well as one for the prosecution by the name of Dr. Harold Zolan, did examine him and came back with the following conclusions. He was a user of heroin and LSD, which might account for the voices and the hallucinations. He also had antisocial personality disorder. But what the prosecution's doctor, Dr. Zolan, differed from Dr. Schwartz, the defense's attorney, is that unlike the true insanity offense, when you would have no control, have no recollection, have no idea that what you're doing is wrong, he contended that even though he has antisocial personality disorder, might have been geeked out on drugs at the time, but he still knew what he was doing and could have stopped at any moment. And the fact that he took time to clean himself and clean the crime scene, as well as dispose of the murder weapon and the bloody clothes, is indication that he knew exactly what he was doing. It was also an indication that it was sort of a sneak attack. As I said, all 6 victims were found lying on their stomach. Faces, there's some discussion about whether the faces were face down in the pillow or toward the door, but let's just say that it was obvious, except for possibly Mom Louise and Sister Allison, that all of them had been asleep at the time that they were shot. They also, again, found no drugs, nothing like that in the family's system. Neighbors said they heard nothing. They heard no shots. They did hear a neighbor's dog, a sheepdog by the name of Shaggy, barking, but they heard no other indication. And then that's when they got into the volatile relationship with between the DeFeos, the father and the son, and that police and district attorneys also raised the question of possible motives, since they were trying to throw insanity out. What could the possible motives be? And that was simply a life insurance policy that would have made Butch DeFeo a millionaire a couple of times over. And so it kind of boiled down, in their opinion, to good old-fashioned greed. The next month, November 21st, 1975, DeFeo was found guilty on 6 counts of second-degree murder. The only thing they did not find him guilty of was premeditation. So they didn't think that he had sat and planned this murder, out and planned it, that it was kind of a spur of moment thing. He came home and he just took advantage of the fact his family was asleep and did it. On December 4th, he was sentenced to 6 sentences, 25 each, consecutively. So essentially, life in prison. He was held at the Sullivan Correctional Facility near Fallsburg, New York, until his death in 2021 at the age of 69. He was brought up for parole several times, as well as having many of his appeals all denied. His story kept changing. His story kept going from mafia hitman to I did it, but I don't know I did it. I was insane, to, oh, my older sister, Dawn, killed their mother and as part of a domestic fight. And then one thing led to another, and they all ended up dead. So it's literally been a changing story from the time he was arrested to the time his last appeal expired. So why would a man kill his whole family? Why did the Chris Watts and the Jeffrey McDonalds of the world and the Butch DeFeos of the world do that? Greed. They, lots of times family annihilators feel that their family's a disappointment to them, or their family's holding them back, or they're a disappointment to their family. Or it's just good old-fashioned greed. I think this was kind of a little bit of all that. He wanted to get rid of an abusive father and probably felt that, he could be much better off a millionaire than not, wouldn't we all? And so that was the case. But where does Amityville go from a story of a family annihilator, murder, cut and dry, to the legends it's become? That has to do with 2 different stories. That has to do with the original story of The Haunting of Amityville, and then the emergence on the scene of 2 other individuals who we will discuss in part 3. But basically, December 1975, George and Kathy Lutz and their 3 children moved into the Amityville house. And after 28 days, they fled the house, claiming to have been terrorized by paranormal phenomenon. They wrote a book, profited off of it, to lie detectors, which came up with no recollection of lying, no indication of lying. But we all know that lie detectors are not 100% effective, that any type of emotion or just remaining calm can get a desired effect. So lie detectors are not really relied upon as proof of truth. I just want people to know that. And of course, they finally, after many appearances on talk shows and stuff like that, have said that the events of the book were mostly true. But basically, it was almost as if they were spinning that maybe it was this haunted house that caused the DeFeo murders, and now the spirits of the family have joined with whatever bougies were already in the house to torment them. Enter Ed and Lorraine Warren. If you don't know who they are, here they are. They are paranormal investigators. Ed fancies himself a demonologist. Lorraine fancies herself, or did until their recent deaths, fancy themselves fancies herself a clairvoyant. And they were, as far as we know, one of the only two demonologists / clairvoyant / exorcist commissioned by the Catholic Church, the Roman Catholic Church. Ed was born September 7th, 1926 in Bridgeport, Connecticut. He died in 2006. His wife, Lorraine, was born January 31st, 1927, also in Bridgeport. She died in 2019. They were the founders of the New England Society for Psychic Research, and they basically are the inspiration for not only the Amityville Horror movie, because they were the first investigators called in by the Lutzes to investigate the house. And I actually have a video clip of them talking about that before their deaths, talking about that investigation, which I'll drop for you here.
Let out of there.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
That's all
Now I
he
was getting a
kept
little sick
saying.
of this. I said, I don't know. I'm not a clairvoyant. I'm not a medium. I'm an investigator. And I thought to myself, this guy doesn't even want to talk about it. Is he that scared of it? Well, I found out that he was afraid to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't want to give a recognition.
Right.
Well, we took the keys. We went to the house. Now, as I just said, I'm not a clairvoyant. I'm not a sensitive. But when I opened up that door and walked in that house, it reeked of death. Not just because of the 6 people who were murdered, the DeFeos, mother, father, 2 sisters, and 2 brothers. And this all occurred on November 13th, 1974 at 3:15 in the morning. Every member of the family was found shot to death, all lying on their stomach, Tony. Now, we'll get into that during the program, but that in itself was unnatural. The police had felt they were drugged. They were not drugged, and they found that out during the autopsy.
Mm-hmm.
We walked into that house, and it's my custom, Tony, to go down into the cellar, the lowest part of the house. These are usually the darkest areas. This is where evil thrives. This is where it survives. It hates God's light. It hates the sunlight. It hates any kind of light. So while Lorraine was walking up the stairs with the camera crew, I went down into the cellar. It was a huge place. We'll show pictures of it later. And as is my custom as a religious demonologist, I took out a crucifix, I held it up, and I commanded in the name of Jesus Christ and the blood of Christ what was there to reveal itself. It wasted no time. I never had such a quick reaction, Tony. I felt as though I was underneath a waterfall. That's how terrific the pressure was on my head and shoulders, forcing me down to the floor. Then
as well as the investigations of all of the stuff represented in the Conjuring universe. That is The Conjuring, Annabelle, The Conjuring 2, The Nun, all of that. All of that is from the books that they have written, stories of their investigations. What do I think of the Warrens? I usually have 2 ways that I go about addressing people like this. It's either they're complete con artists, or they actually are delusional and believe this stuff. Or, as my friend Jim Hall from the Atheist Edge says, they start out as cons and then they psych themselves into believing it. What do I think of the Warrens? I think it's a little bit of all the above. I think they actually believe in this stuff. And it just kind of grew into a kind of a saga for them. I mean, according to Lorraine, she was having clairvoyant experiences as a child. She could see dead people, hear dead people. She met Ed at the age of 16. They married right after World War II in 1945 when he was home on leave. They took art classes and began their career selling paintings on roadsides. He himself had grown up in an old farmhouse in Connecticut that he thought was haunted. And I think, and that's actually what fed a lot of his artistic endeavors. If you've ever seen any paintings by Ed Warren, they are very paranormal influenced. It's easy to see. And then he began to merge the two. And I just think together they actually psyched themselves into believing it. I don't think they're bad people. I think they're more deluded people. They did found the Psychic Research Society in 1952, and that's when they started investigating paranormal activity. According to anyone that's ever worked with them, they never took any payment for anything they did. They just took it as experience, trying to help people out. And then, of course, they made their payday off of membership in their society, as well as selling the books documenting their investigations. So let's talk about some of their notable investigations. The Perron family. This is the one that is documented in the original Conjuring movie, the farmhouse in Harrisville, Rhode Island, that was haunted by a witch by the name of Bathsheba Sherman, who cursed the land and committed suicide. So if you've ever seen The Conjuring, that's what it's based on. Then, of course, there's the Amityville, which is when they were one of the first investigators called in. They did believe the house was haunted. They've even alluded that perhaps it was the bougies in the house that caused the murder, that it wasn't vice versa. It wasn't the murder causing the hauntings, but the hauntings causing the murder. And then that just added to it. Believe what you will. And then, of course, the Annabelle doll, which it's portrayed in the movie The Conjuring and Annabelle. It's a very creepy looking porcelain doll. Not so. It was actually a Raggedy Ann doll. The Raggedy Ann, the company that makes Raggedy Ann, I think it's Hasbro, would not allow them to use it in the movie because why would they? And that it was actually haunted by the spirit of a young girl named Annabelle Higgins that was part of a cult and then ended up killing herself and was also kind of a tortured child. They also kept an occult museum in the basement of their Connecticut home, which featured the Annabelle doll and other things that supposedly had been used in occult rituals or had a demon or some other type of ghost attached to it. They've been quoted many, many times saying that ghosts are different than demons. Demons have never been alive on the earth, and so they will attach themselves to both humans and non-animate objects, whereas ghosts will stay near a real live person. Other notable investigations of theirs, the 1981 murder case in which Orange Cheyenne Johnson was accused of killing Alan Bono, his landlord. This is featured in the newest Conjuring movie, The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, in which it was alleged he was possessed by a demon. And you also have many other different movies, including A Haunting in Connecticut, based on the Snedeker house. But let's just say that everything to do with Amityville and The Conjuring is based to Ed and Lorraine Warren. I don't think they're frauds. I think they generally believe what they did. And I'm one that knows that if you believe something enough, you can psych yourself into believing it's actually happened. So, yeah, they're full of crap, but I don't think it's an intentional crap, if that makes sense. But that is the legend behind the Amityville. There was a real life murder there, and then everything else based on the writings of a couple of demonologists, clairvoyant, paranormal investigators, whatever you want to believe, that made a career off of paranormal investigation. So I hope you've enjoyed this, and don't go to the Amityville house. I mean, the people that own it now, everybody that's owned it since the Lutzes have said they've had no type of haunting, no type of no type of scary experience, nothing that would lead them to believe the house is haunted. So either the Warrens did their job and got the bougies out of the house, or it's all BS. But this was the true story of the Amityville haunting. And I hope you've enjoyed it. And this has been me for a Keto and Krime Quickie. And I really appreciate you joining me. I'll be back soon. Until next time, Keto and Krime.